The process of entering the vehicle, starting the engine, and exiting the residence was more straightforward than anticipated. I was departing from the house I had inhabited with Connie for the past 9 years. We had purchased the property before getting married and moved in shortly after our honeymoon. I had an intuitive sense that the transition would be more challenging. 10 minutes later, I turned onto the freeway and proceeded northbound on the I-45. My intended route was to take the I-35 toward Oklahoma City and then to Kansas City before turning north. Once more, my destination was Minneapolis. I negotiated a transfer, and my superior expressed dismay, noting that the climate was harsh during the winter and that I would be responsible for snow removal. I responded with a light-hearted remark about my familiarity with cold temperatures. He gave a noncommittal shrug, and I was preparing to leave town when I began to reflect on the circumstances that had led to this point. The situation began just over a year ago, during a period of unemployment. Connie's close acquaintance visited my office and informed me that her vehicle was in the repair shop and that she required transportation home. To be candid, I never truly. I was drawn to this woman, who I perceived to be overly demanding of herself. In other words, she was a genuine person, but I tolerated her because she had been my wife's closest friend since elementary school. Upon our arrival at her place, she encouraged me to go upstairs. I replied that I needed to get home, as Connie was out of town and I did not have to hurry. She offered to cook, which I suspected was an attempt to gain my trust, as she dislikes cooking. She then proceeded to show me more than I needed to see, which led me to inform her that I was not interested in pursuing a romantic relationship. She then indicated that it was time for her to go outside. She pouted, stating that I was unaware of what I was missing. I simply gazed at her, and she then said, "Who would know?" I responded, "I'd know." She finally gave up and grinned. I cannot blame a girl for trying. She exited the vehicle, and I drove off without looking back. I probably should have known by now that it was not over, but I was foolish to have been so naive. That is when my journey began. I will summarize it here. I just turned 34 years old. My height was 6 feet, but I was actually a little. I am now shorter, though I previously stated that I am 6 feet tall. My weight is approaching 200 pounds, and I could reduce it by approximately 10 pounds. My hair is short, brown, and so are my eyes. I do not appear as physically unattractive as I once did, and I have always considered myself fortunate to have Connie. She was a strikingly beautiful woman. She was still attractive, but I felt somewhat detached from her. She was more like a stranger or a character on a television show that I had gotten to know over time. I had not yet finished grieving for my lost love, so I simply stopped interacting with her physically. We had anticipated that we would grow old together and die in each other's arms, but that was not to be. Given that a significant portion of me had already died, the loss did not seem as significant as it might have been. There was nothing left for me to do but drive. I allowed my thoughts to reconstruct the events, imagining how I might have acted differently. It had been 6 months since April, when I had given a lift home. Connie returned home visibly angry. I inquired about the issue, but she merely tossed me a glance. Without uttering a word, she proceeded to the bedroom and abruptly closed the door behind her. While somewhat peculiar, it was not an entirely anomalous occurrence. Connie was known to possess a proclivity for anger, yet on the majority of occasions, she would unleash her fury upon me with little to no hesitation. She remained within the confines of the bedroom for a period exceeding an hour. Upon my arrival to ascertain her well-being, I observed her seated at the dressing table, attired in her nightgown and engaged in the act of brushing her hair. She then requested that I depart, a request which I was reluctant to honor, as I was not expected to be there. Consequently, I took my leave. I changed into my day clothes and left the premises. I slept in the spare bedroom, half expecting Connie to follow me. If she did, it would be an ambiguous blessing, as her presence would be solely to voice her dissatisfaction. I went to work without hearing a word from her. I called her twice, but she did not answer. I knew she had called, and I assumed that when she saw my number, she sent it to voicemail. That was okay, but she needed to know I was phoning. I caught her at home that evening, so I was not surprised when she was not there by 9 o'clock. At 11 p.m., I proceeded to dial her cellular telephone and leave a message. I began to feel a slight sense of anger. I was attempting to fall asleep when the phone rang. It was Connie, who was not in a state of sobriety. I could discern this from the way she spoke, which was in short, staccato phrases. She informed me that she would not be coming in that evening. She had consumed a few too many drinks and was at a friend's place. This information caused me some concern. However, she terminated the call before I could say anything. I arose from bed and waited for a period of time, uncertain of what to do at midnight. I attempted to contact her again, but her voicemail picked up. My emotions were a complex blend of anger and frustration, yet I was helpless to do anything about it. I imagined that my colleagues were aware of my state of mind. That night, I decided to go inside for a drink. I was going to be late as well, but I ended up staying out until after midnight. I discovered Connie's vehicle in the garage. The engine was cold. I realized that she was at least an hour ahead of me. I went in expecting a scene, but there was none. The house was dark. I groped my way into the bedroom, and upon finding the door locked, I felt both drunk and exhausted. I collapsed on the vacant bed. The next morning, I awoke a little late and found myself alone. Connie had already departed. Fortunately for me, it was Friday morning. I arrived at work. Somewhat late and attempted to make the best of the day. I did not contact Connie directly, but instead reached out to a male colleague who worked with her to ensure she made it. He was only able to confirm that her vehicle was present in the parking lot on Friday night. I proceeded to enter the house and found her waiting for me. She had consumed a glass of wine and was wearing a serious expression. I was greeted with the following words: "It is evident that a discussion is required," a sentiment that is echoed by numerous married men. Additionally, it is crucial to pay close attention to her subsequent actions. She began by inquiring whether there was anything she wished to divulge. She responded in the affirmative but stated that she had not deemed it appropriate to disclose the information at that moment. I was also reminded of an ancient adage: I will wait for her to inform me of my shortcomings. I am not inclined to admit any wrongdoing on my part. I was previously unaware of this information. When I ceased speaking, she began to divulge her thoughts. "I did not anticipate that you would confess on your own accord, but I am now aware of the full extent of your actions. I am unable to conceal this information any longer. I had not anticipated that you would betray me in this manner. I am currently uncertain as to what I have done to deserve this. I have attempted to ascertain the truth, but I have not purchased any expensive items. I have not planned a fishing trip in the bay." I recalled the date of the incident. The date in question was neither her birthday nor our anniversary. What, then, did she mean by betrayal? One must consider how to lie one's way out of this. I gave my wife of 8 years a look that said, "I'll figure it out if I know what I'm looking for." Come on, Martin. Remember, you believed you could get away with it. Right. What did they get away with? If you wish to continue this futile discourse, I shall retire to the nearest establishment where I shall consume a quantity of alcohol sufficient to render me unconscious. I am not inclined to remain in this state of inebriation until you are prepared to divulge the reason for your actions and provide an explanation as to why you have done this. What is the rationale behind your decision? You have the floor. She was quite serious, but what was I expected to admit? I am aware that I may be perceived as lacking in sensitivity, but it is a quality that is common to all males. What am I missing? I attempted to remain calm. What have you done? I am unable to apologize until I understand what I did. Expressions of remorse will not resolve the issue. This will undoubtedly have consequences for me. I considered what those consequences might be and then inquired about the potential costs. I am not yet certain of the extent of the expenses, but I recognized that they would be significant. I was particularly concerned about the possibility of losing my marriage. This situation seemed serious. I began to question what I had done. The sequence of events that transpired was precisely what I had anticipated when she became aware of my uncertainty. Her brow furrowed, and her rage intensified. She proceeded to elucidate the circumstances to me before I could utter a word. She asserted that I had presumed I could engage in an illicit relationship with my close acquaintance and evade consequences. She proceeded to provide a detailed account of the situation. I am now aware of the circumstances. I have been contemplating the actions I have taken and questioning how many others may exist that I am unaware of. I gazed across the table at her with a look of disbelief, which only served to upset her further. You offered her a ride home and intended to pay her for it. You pursued her to the door and stormed out after her. She did not want the ride, but she decided it was preferable to risk damaging our relationship. I was at a loss for words. I recalled offering Anne a ride home, yet despite her counsel, I declined. In fact, I had forgotten about the incident in question. As you can imagine, the remainder of the weekend was fraught with challenges. There was yelling, threats, tears, and name-calling. I was only partially responsible for the latter, but I continued to contribute to the conflict for 3 months. We slept in different beds, and I was at my wits' end. The end of the marriage was reached, and a divorce attorney was sought. A friend had employed the services of Jerry Lewis during his divorce. The lawyer's name was Jerry Lewis, although he was not a comedian. His wife had taken advantage of him financially during the divorce proceedings, and he took every opportunity to express his frustration with the female gender. I was about to make a suggestion when Connie approached me one night and said it was time to make things right. She asserted that our marriage was too vital to both of us to persist in our current state of affairs. She proposed a truce and recommended that we divide the master bedroom. I experienced a slight improvement in my emotional state, but the damage was already done. Everything changed after that. It was not peace but rather a truce. We both felt it then. One night it happened. It was Friday night, and Connie had not arrived home. I received a telephone call at midnight informed me that she would be spending the night away from the house. I did not contest the decision, I simply accepted it. This was the second instance of Connie failing to return home at the expected time. She arrived at noon, wearing shorts, a blouse, and sandals. She was carrying a gym bag, and her demeanor was cheerful, as though nothing untoward had occurred. She proceeded to the bathroom and took a shower. Before closing the door, I inspected the bag. The plastic bag that held her work clothes from Friday contained an evening gown, heels, makeup, and underwear. I was perplexed by this discovery. My mind began to wander, conjuring up a myriad of possibilities. I considered not only unfavorable scenarios but also, perhaps, that she had attended a company party. She had not merely extended an invitation to me, she had also, it seemed, invited someone else. Despite everything, I still loved her. When she entered the kitchen, she smiled and thanked me for helping her unpack. I interpreted this as a sign that she wanted to tell me what had happened, so I asked Connie. She blushed and attempted to appear humble. To be perfectly honest, I had a date. I will not lie about it, as she did. What the hell are you talking about? She replied. I must be frank and candid. I did indeed provide entertainment, and thus I was afforded my own opportunity for enjoyment. It is evident that Connie was not pleased to be referred to in such a manner. I have already informed you that there was no romantic involvement between us. I am at a loss as to why you continue to doubt my sincerity. You persist in disseminating falsehoods, yet I am disinclined to believe them. I had a splendid date, and we enjoyed a delightful dinner and dancing. I must note that it has been some time since you have taken me to a dance. After the dance, we returned to his residence. He was a gentleman, indeed. He was gentle and took his time. I am not interested in hearing any further details. I remained seated at the table, simply wanting her to be quiet. Connie was aware that she had found my weak spot. He was a wonderful lover, taking care of me in every way. He could have provided advice, but I was not interested. I exclaimed, why not? I did not want to hear that another man could give me pleasure better than he could. I stated, I just don't want to. I then proceeded to cover my face with my hands and vocalize my desire to vomit. However, despite the initial urge, I did not vomit. Instead, after an hour, the urge dissipated. I proceeded to wash my face, exit the bathroom, procure a beer, and venture to the back porch. It was there, while watching the sunset, that Connie arrived. I was so absorbed in the natural beauty of the setting that I did not acknowledge her presence. I was initially unaware of her presence until she spoke. When she did, I was startled. She said, "Isn't the sunset beautiful? It marks the end of the day and the promise of a new tomorrow." I was taken aback, but I quickly regained my composure. I looked at her and then at the last rays of the sun. I replied, "Yes, let's make our problems and put them behind us. Tomorrow, we can start a new life." I observed the woman once more. She appeared to me in a different light. How could she be so careless about her actions? Connie sipped her wine. I believe we should make new vows to each other and then go to bed and seal them. This struck me as humorous, and I laughed for the first time in hours. What is so funny? She asked in a nasty tone. I'm not sure, I replied. Let us consider a new vow. Why didn't you satisfy the preceding one was similarly unfulfilled. I gazed at her with as much loathing as I could recall. Do not look at me like that, she said. Her voice softened. I still love you, and I want this all behind us. Let's go to bed. I need you, and I want you. Damn, you're insane, woman, she said again. What does that mean? I asked. Martin Raymond Jameson, she replied. Connie went into mother mode, using all three of my names. She knew it. I was incensed. I informed her that I was not going to engage in sexual intercourse with her and that I would instead return to my friend. I then proceeded to leave the room. She followed me, presumably assuming that we would engage in sexual intercourse, but this did not occur. I picked up the majority of my clothes and relocated them to the spare room. She followed me, expressing either joy or an intention to provide an explanation, but I ignored her. The next item I retrieved was: on the evening in question, the temperature in Houston was below freezing, and this was further exacerbated on the following day. I was compelled to accept these circumstances and proceeded to my place of work. I was engaged in the arduous task of translation and was committed to providing Jerry Lewis with the best possible result. I believe he was gratified by the outcome. This endeavor was completed approximately 2 weeks ago, and I am now alone on the road to Minneapolis. The journey was characterized by a profound sense of solitude, and the loss was more profound than anticipated. I had anticipated stopping in Kansas before continuing, but instead proceeded directly through, not because I desired to, but due to concern that if I stopped, I might lose the opportunity to make a decision and end up returning the following morning. Extended periods of wakefulness can be challenging for individuals arriving in a new location after a long journey. I was eager to rest and found a hotel where I checked in. Given that it was Saturday, I paid for 2 days. While I was not required to come into the office during the week, I did not wish to stay in the hotel. It was evident that everyone in the company was surprised to learn that I was traveling alone. There was a suggestion that a farewell dinner should be held for us, Connie and I. However, as I explained, I was surprised that the news had not reached Connie. She seemed genuinely astonished when I left. My intention had been to depart before she returned home, but due to the last-minute sale and the fact that she arrived a bit early, I had to meet her. I had intended to depart before she returned home, but due to the last-minute sale and the fact that she arrived a bit early, I was obliged to meet her. Upon checking my phone, I realized there would be no call. I therefore purchased a cheap cell phone and transferred my number to it. I subsequently received a new iPhone number, which I carried with me. I concealed the old phone in the den beneath the couch, so that should Connie attempt to call, she would find it. I smiled, but it was a melancholy smile. I wondered if she had attempted to call. Perhaps she was in her friend's bed while I was sitting in a motel room on the outskirts of the country. I had to dismiss the thought from my mind. There was nothing left to do but seek my new office. I was surprised at how easily I found it. I had assumed that every city was like Houston, but that was not the case. During supper, I was alone and came to the realization that I needed a place to stay. I would be satisfied with an apartment, preferably furnished. Monday arrived, and I felt a sense of unease. I had assumed that being away from Connie would help me feel better, but it did not. It is challenging to articulate the nuances of my emotions. Even though I was upset with her, knowing she was in the house brought me some comfort. I had to reconcile with the situation, so I did what I could. I proceeded to the meeting with my superior, Bill, and his secretary, Jackie. Jackie was a woman in her early 50s who dressed professionally and exuded competence. Her smile was appealing, as was the stone on her wedding ring. I focused on it not because I was attracted to her, but because of its size. If it was true, a man who could afford it would not require her salary. It subsequently became apparent that she was married to a man of considerable wealth, which permitted her to continue in her professional capacity. She had been with the company for over 15 years. She accepted the position when her children were in middle school. Bill inquired as to whether I was still employed. I informed him that I was not. He then asked if I wished Jackie to collect any messages for me. I was taken aback by the extent of her plan for me. By 1, the meeting concluded at 10 p.m. While I was retrieving the brochures, she added that she had a daughter of a similar age who would be interested in showing me around. I thanked her but informed her that I was married. Jackie gave me an odd look, then smiled. I assumed she was insulted, but it turns out she was aware of my impending divorce and understood it was a topic I did not want to discuss. If someone needs to confirm your reservation, here is my direct line card. The majority of the complexes are new and in need of tenants, but they may require verification at my second stage. I rented a one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor. The apartment was on the 4th floor and lacked furnishings. However, a business was contracted to equip it and rent or sell any supplied items. I had sufficient funds for the deposit and had already paid for the apartment by Wednesday. I was settled in and prepared to leave. Connie did not contact me until the following Thursday. By then, she was no longer a happy individual. She had received paperwork regarding our. In the context of an impending divorce, I was subjected to verbal abuse and attempted to refrain from responding. I was situated at my desk in my new office and was disinclined to engage in the discussion of sensitive personal matters in the presence of my new colleagues. Additionally, it required approximately 40 calls to locate the telephone that had been concealed beneath the couch. It is noteworthy that I was able to extend a degree of kindness at that juncture. The paperwork was received at the office last Tuesday, and I was only able to locate you after my lawyer requested. I am suing you for breach of contract. The most distressing aspect of this ordeal was witnessing her emotional distress. Despite my initial feelings of love for her, I realized that my feelings had changed. It was difficult to see her in pain. Fortunately, my attorney was able to provide legal representation in Texas, as I was not a resident of the state. He was the intermediary between them. He continued to maintain contact with me, and I could discern that he derived pleasure from provoking Connie. The people of Minnesota were distinctive, not malevolent, but different. They capitalized on the warm weather whenever possible. The sole exception was that all of the pools were closed. People utilized parks and fields to engage in ball games until the early hours of the morning. I began walking during the summer months, when the children were not in school. I was particularly aware of the distance involved. On the first day, I regretted my decision before I had even reached halfway. I anticipated being reprimanded for not having sufficient funds for fuel, but this did not occur. By the second week, I was enjoying my walk and observing the progression from spring to summer. Despite the late September date, the weather had already begun to take on a chill quality. On my final walk of the season, I was not pleased with the temperature or the strength of the wind, which was blowing at 20 miles per hour. I had long suspected that we had subterranean parking garages, but I was not yet fully convinced. As I walked down the hallway to my door, I was startled by the sudden appearance of a woman who nearly collided with me. The only detail I could recall about her attire was that she was wearing a modest swimsuit that barely covered her. I was not disconcerted, as I was going for a swim. I should have donned my wrap first. Her smile illuminated the hallway. I was uncertain how to respond. I regarded her as if I had never seen a woman before. "Will I see you there?" she inquired. I had not planned on it. I attempted to smile, perhaps next time. Then she departed. I must have appeared foolish. I remained where I was, watching her depart. She did not put her handkerchief on. Upon turning the corner, she placed the handkerchief on her shoulder rather than throwing it over her shoulder. I proceeded to my door and then experienced a moment of self-consciousness. As I unlocked the door, I thought about her. I had just arrived inside when the phone rang. I was on the phone, so I grabbed the receiver. I surmised that the call was a surprise. Connie responded affirmatively, indicating that she was indeed aware of the situation. I inquired about the current status of the situation, unable to think of anything else to say. I then asked her if she genuinely cared about the matter. My question was posed without any sarcasm, and it seemed to resonate with her. She replied, "Yes, in a manner. I am not doing well. I miss you and I want you back. I just got your number. It took me a considerable amount of time to locate you. I have a great deal of affection for Martin, and I am sorry for my actions, but I am unable to reconcile with you. I will make amends." I could hear her crying quietly. "Please allow me to reflect on this matter. I must admit that I am unsure of the details. A great deal of time has passed since our separation. Regarding the wedding, I was unable to provide a definitive response. I did, however, pledge to consider the matter and contact her at a later date. She still had access to our previous telephone number and mobile phone, which I had memorized. We proceeded to converse and share some light-hearted moments. It was a bittersweet experience, evoking memories of what I had lost. I terminated the call. Over the following days, I experienced a period of intense internal conflict. I was acutely aware of the scrutiny I faced in the workplace. Finally, on the 6th day, I made the call. It was a challenging conversation, but I informed Connie that we should proceed with a divorce. I was relieved when I hung up the phone. The divorce was finalized on Friday. I drove home, exiting the elevator and approaching my door. I noticed Connie sitting on her suitcase. She did not seem pleased. I approached her. The distance between us was more than 100 feet, but I wished it was less. After a mile, she saw me and her face brightened. "What are you doing here?" I inquired, but not in anger. "I just had to come," I said. "I still love you, and I believe you still love me. I couldn't let it go without one final try." I looked around, then let her go in. "I do not mind," she said. "I believe we need some privacy." She said this as she looked down the hallway. I followed her gaze but found nothing inside. She attempted to kiss me, but it felt wrong. She was slightly offended. "What is the matter?" she asked. "Have I got bad breath?" "No," I said. "It is just wrong." "Is it all right with that?" she asked. Red. I was taken aback by her assertion. I simply stared at her, perplexed by her meaning. I was unaware of her implication. I had long been aware that hall monitor was monitoring my face. The individual, whom I had previously observed seated at Martin's door, now approached me with a query regarding my presence at the entrance. I was uncertain as to the identity of this person, yet I proceeded to the door and opened it, calling out for her. "My name is inscribed on the door itself. She was already aware of you, as evidenced by her expression when I informed her that I was your wife. You will not have the opportunity to do so again." I was in no way prepared for this turn of events. I replied, raising my voice, "Mr. Jameson, if you are unaware of her identity, how do you know that you did not engage in sexual intercourse with her?" In response to her, I remained silent throughout the night. The following morning, we engaged in a series of discussions, arguments, and confrontations. It is probable that the majority of individuals in the hall or the apartment to my left were aware of the commotion, though not necessarily of the specific content of our exchange. On Saturday afternoon, I seated Connie at the table. We both exhibited a slight decrease in emotional intensity. She apologized to me, so I had to explain to Connie that I had forgiven her. I had forgiven her a while back, but she had not returned home. This was an understandable response, given the circumstances. While I can forgive, the damage has been done. Let me clarify. You took my most cherished possession and damaged it. It is irrelevant whether the act was committed in a state of rage or by accident, the item is now in a state of disrepair. I am willing to forgive you, even if you acted intentionally, because I understand that your actions were driven by rage, not vengeance. She smiled and remained silent. I raised my hand and continued as I had already stated. My most prized possession was damaged beyond repair. It could have been mended, but each time I saw it, I was reminded of the damage and my distress at it. You have not forgiven Connie because you believe she has not taken responsibility for her actions. As a result, you believe that the relationship is irreparably damaged. I empathize with your pain, but I must acknowledge that the emotional bond we shared was unique. However, the incident in question has irrevocably altered the nature of our relationship. I care for you deeply, but I believe it is in your best interest to pursue a separate path. I am not willing to endure the anguish of this separation on a daily basis." Connie, visibly distressed, interjected, "I understand when his touch and everything else just wasn't like you, Martin. When I was with him, it wasn't the same." "It wasn't about what?" she said, but I knew she had done more than just grasp old Roger's hand. It hurt, and I hoped I'd never hear the name Martin again. I went outdoors with every intention of doing so, but I was unable to do so. I thought of you, and it wasn't that, then you know what I mean. I asked, not willing to go any further on the matter. Yes, but believe me, I'm telling you the truth. Nothing happened. Connie shouted out before she started crying again. I held her with a broken heart. I felt all the pain again at that time. At that time, the truth didn't matter. It was finished, and I was aware that significant emotional damage had been done, yet I did not feel anger. I experienced a profound sense of hurt. On Saturday night, I accompanied Connie to the airport and assisted her through the security procedures. I then proceeded to return home. I felt a sense of exhaustion, depletion, and emptiness. I proceeded to walk down the corridor to my door, which seemed to be the same distance I had imagined on Friday afternoon. I was only 3 steps from the door when she emerged, startling me. I paused in place and gazed at her. She appeared to be the same woman I had seen in her bathing suit. I conducted a comprehensive examination of her from head to toe. I had not previously observed that she had red hair. I was momentarily distracted by the realization that I did not appear to be at my best. I apologized and began to reflect on the situation. I was surprised by her appearance and needed to regain my bearings. I was intrigued by her presence and considered the possibility of becoming her acquaintance. I invited her in and suggested that she take a seat for a moment. I perceived that she might benefit from the company of a friend. I observed her name was Kate Taylor. I considered how many times I had passed her residence without noticing it, even after seeing her in a swimsuit. I followed her into her apartment, primarily to avoid any potential negative consequences. The apartment of Katie, which I had previously passed by on numerous occasions, now seemed welcoming. The warmth I felt was not merely a result of the temperature, but also emanated from the ambience. In a short time, we were drinking wine. I gazed into her striking green eyes and inquired, "Are you the hall monitor?" She smiled and responded, "Guilty. The wine had you may be unaware of the effect this has had on me, but Connie referred to you as I'm not sure why I said that, but I did. I'm sorry again." She grinned while holding her glass. "I hope this does not make you think any less of me." "Not at all, but I cannot say the same for my soon-to-be ex-wife." My wife's remark was of no consequence to me. I simply observed her grin and experienced a sensation of warmth throughout my body. I attributed this to the wine I had consumed. I then recall waking up to the aroma of coffee and bacon. I was famished after not eating anything all day Saturday. I looked around and realized I was not lying on my bed. I was just wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I looked to the opposite side of the bed and saw that it was undisturbed. My slacks and t-shirt were still there. My attire was observed to be situated at the foot of the bed. It required a period of time to ascertain its location. It was subsequently determined to be Katie's bedroom. At that juncture, she entered the room. She appeared to be somewhat disoriented, with bushy eyebrows and a similar radiant smile as previously observed. As I gradually regained my faculties, it became evident that the cause was not the wine consumed the previous night. It was gratifying to note that I had regained consciousness before the effects of the coffee and bacon had dissipated. "If I had been the cause of your waking, I would have immediately contacted emergency medical services. Might I inquire as to your place of repose?" A smile continued to flood the room from the couch. "My mother used to say that the best way into a man's heart is through his stomach. I have always held a different opinion on the matter, but now that you have gotten up to eat, I will have to reconsider my opinion that that is how the bathroom is set up. I will prepare breakfast while you are safe there. I believe that bacon, eggs, and bread will be sufficient." We had a conversation at the table. Kathy was simple to communicate with and be around. The day went smoothly, and I felt better when evening arrived. Therefore, I went home to change and took her to dinner. My voicemail contained a dozen calls from Connie. I disregarded them on Tuesday. My lawyer informed me that Connie had decided to adopt a more aggressive stance in the proceedings. I posited that she had likely encountered a man named Roger. This hypothesis did not elicit any surprise from him. I was subsequently informed that the attorneys had studied Connie's phone records for the previous 6 months and discovered frequent calls to a number that was traced to Roger Smith. This man was Barton's direct supervisor encouraged me not to worry, suggesting that her lawyer's efforts would prove effective in bringing me back to reality. Connie ended the calls that had previously brought me happiness, as did the fact that I was now miles away from her. It was not until 1 month later that I learned what had transpired. My attorney, Mr. Jerry Lewis, strongly opposed their actions, taking statements from both Connie and Anne. In the following week, I was scheduled to be questioned under oath at the deposition. Connie claimed that she had not committed adultery and that it was all a lie to make me believe she had. She also testified that I had engaged in intimate relations with her. At this point, my counsel did not contest any of these women's testimonies. He then proceeded to take out his laptop and play a video clip that I had recorded. He had the foresight to utilize my iPhone to record a detailed description of Connie's date. Upon screening the video clip and distributing it to the board, Jerry inquired as to whether he could invite one additional person. He requested that Roger Smith be included. However, images of Connie and Roger were taken at 3 different locations, and it became evident that Roger Smith was a key figure in this situation. Louis inquired about the nature of Connie's relationship with Smith and the reasons behind their frequent meetings at restaurants in the evenings, where Smith was the boss of the establishment. He also suggested that he had photographic evidence of Smith with other women. At this point, and Burton Trump was aware that Jerry had already spoken with Roger Smith and described the issue to him. He was therefore faced with 2 options: either he could be subpoenaed, or he could assist in convincing Connie to accept a lesser settlement than that which he was offering. Both women were aware that if he were subpoenaed, it might result in a divorce, and he had pledged to blame himself if that were to happen. Furthermore, he was willing to fabricate a narrative in which he was solely responsible for the dissolution of the marriage. He also attempted to shift blame for the subsequent arrangement of dates between him and Connie to another party. Connie ultimately agreed to the terms set forth by my lawyer, but a dispute arose regarding the allocation of costs. The remaining 2 parties were unable to reach an agreement on how to share the costs. I must concede that I was impressed by my lawyer and felt gratified that on that day, Jerry made her sign the agreement. He stated that he would send it to me for evaluation if it was approved. He indicated that he would then formalize it and submit the order to the judge. He estimated that it would take approximately 1 to 2 weeks, but he did not wait at all. I received the documentation by 10, the time was 12 a.m. On the following morning, I awaited the delivery of the documents at the local FedEx office. Having placed my trust in the individual in question, I proceeded to check and return them. By 4 p.m., the documents had been received. I was divorced. I waited at the office and received his fax a week later. I would receive the official decree by registered mail. The divorce was finalized on Wednesday, and I planned to throw a small party on Thursday night. I considered who would be a suitable partner for this event, and Kathy was the obvious choice. As I was preparing to leave my residence, I received a telephone call while in the restroom. I contacted Katie to inquire about the call, assuming it was related to work. Upon my return to the living area, I overheard a conversation between Kathy and another individual. I assumed that Kathy had recognized me and was attempting to contact me. However, I could not fully comprehend the words being spoken. There was a great deal of shouting on the other end of the line. "Is it nice to hear you?" "Yes." "Now, what can I do for you?" More yelling. I simply looked around, attempting to discern the situation. "I will get him if you want." "Wait. He just stepped out of the shower." A brief pause. "Martin, you could at least wrap up with a towel. You are making me feel embarrassed." "Yes, Connie. I believe he can speak with you now." To be heard on the Underground Railway, I inquired as to why she was embarrassed. In response, Connie unleashed a volley of insults at me. I held the telephone away from my ear, while Kathy rubbed one index finger against the other, murmuring, "Shame on you," and attempting to suppress her laughter. Connie had previously assured me that we were still married. Despite being married, she had reconsidered and informed me of her continued affection. She made a derisive comment about redheads being home wreckers when I abruptly stated that we were divorced. She was initially incredulous and requested evidence. However, I believed our relationship had reached its conclusion. She then made another threat to come over. I finally said goodbye, but she was still wailing. It felt so fantastic for a minute, but then it struck me harder. It appeared that Katie had figured it out. We went to dinner, then returned to her house. She suggested I move to another apartment. She volunteered to take care of it the next morning while I was working. I discovered that she was working as an assistant property manager to keep the rent low. Consequently, the next day I wound up at the apartment next to hers. We shared a balcony, but she assured me I was safe. There was a 30. On the following afternoon, I received a call on my cellular telephone. Connie was standing in a tent in front of my former door, aware of the circumstances. The manager showed her the vacant apartment and stated that he was unaware of her new location. I was then informed that this was not entirely untruthful because Kathy had not updated her documentation at the time Connie refused. In order to relocate and assert that she would await the arrival of the hall monitor at Kathy's door, we were compelled to contact the manager, security personnel, and the police to persuade her to depart that evening. I surreptitiously entered the premises and proceeded to the upper floor. I knocked on Kathy's door and inquired whether I had been reassigned. She provided me with a new key and then handed me a basket of clean laundry. It was a rather embarrassing situation, as she had washed all of my belongings, including. I informed her that I had not purchased a washer and dryer because there was a laundry room in the basement. It was more cost-effective to rent than to buy. Kathy acknowledged my point but countered that it was preferable to own one's laundry appliances. She cited the potential for contamination from other individuals' items as a concern. She offered to let me use hers whenever I wanted it. I offered to buy supper again, but she stated that we had already gone out the night before. She cooked, or, rather, she prepared the food, and we ate salad and sandwiches. She made them extremely lovely and tasty. Later that evening, we sat on the balcony and observed a light snowfall begin. It turned into a storm, forcing all flights to be grounded. Connie was stranded. Thus far, Kathy and I have not engaged in any intimate moments at the airport, where we have been stranded for 36 hours. I have kissed her, but there has been no further physical contact. I have enjoyed her company and thought of her frequently. I was simply concerned that I was not ready for a relationship yet. It was not until 3 weeks later that I invited Kathy to the corporate Christmas party. She looked really gorgeous in a black sequin dress that fit her figure. Her dress was cut to her ankles, but it was slashed on the sides to reveal black shorts underneath. She wore high heels, a professional hairstyle, and makeup. She wore a diamond pendant and matching earrings. I gazed at her, whispering, "You are beautiful. I hope to keep you at the party." I had to explain my intentions. I knew there would be numerous males at the party with much more enticing offers for her. She smiled, interpreting my compliment as a positive assessment of her appearance. When we arrived at the party, she recognized my workplace. When I mentioned that I worked for Tate Pressure Controls, she laughed. I was previously unaware that she worked for the same company. She frequently attempts to facilitate connections between me and her colleague. If she and I happen to meet, she often invites him to join us. I am somewhat concerned about the potential implications of such encounters. She inquired as to whether we had ever discussed our respective places of employment. "Where do you work?" "I work for Steelman, a supplier of ours. It is a small world. I work in the accounts payable department, which is not particularly enjoyable." She laughed, which greatly cheered me. Then I saw my boss. I directed Kathy toward him. "Hello, Bill. I'd like to introduce you to Catherine Taylor. Kathy, this is my boss, Bill Green. This is my superior, Bill Green. I apologize for not introducing you to your wife." "Kathy, what a surprise." "Hello, Bill. It's nice to see you again. How are the children?" I felt as though I had missed something, and then I experienced another shock. Jackie approached and embraced Kathy. I was introduced to Jackie's husband, Rick Taylor. It appeared as though everyone was acquainted with Kathy. After a brief interval, Kathy whispered too. Jackie began laughing, which surprised Kathy and captured everyone's attention. Jackie clasped her husband's hand, and they departed within minutes. Bill and his wife were engaged to another couple. I inquired about the circumstances, and Kathy stared me directly in the eyes but did not respond. Instead, she led me to a quiet location near the dancing floor. It was my mother, and I requested that she not bring her. I informed the individual from my office that I was on a date and did not require assistance. She immediately burst into laughter and led my father away. "I will investigate this matter further." It struck me that Jackie had offered to assist her daughter and show me around. This was the same Jackie who had someone in mind for her daughter, Kathy. Kathy noticed me pondering and asked, "What are you thinking about?" "Sister, no, it's just me and my brother. Unfortunately, we lost him to cancer approximately 10 years ago. You could hear the pain in her voice. I apologize. I hope I haven't ruined your evening. She smiled. You did not ruin it, and I pray my mother doesn't. I doubt she'd drag a guy in here simply to give me a choice. I remembered how many times Jackie had asked me to call her daughter. I was with the same woman. It was actually rather amusing, but I might be mistaken. Alternatively, Jackie may have other men in mind for her tie. I choose to keep my thoughts to myself. I would wait and see what the night would bring. A few minutes later, the orchestra began playing. I warned Katie that I am not a good dancer, but she followed me onto the dance floor anyway. I drew her into the dance. We proceeded to dance at a leisurely pace across the dance floor. While it is uncertain how our movements appeared to others, it was evident that we derived great pleasure from the experience. We subsequently joined my superior and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Chapman, for dinner. Jackie and Rick were also present at the table. Our division's president, Charles Chapman, was not someone I had previously encountered, yet I had observed his photograph on numerous occasions. It was evident that Kathy was well known in the group, as she was greeted by numerous individuals. I, on the other hand, was a relatively unfamiliar presence. Throughout the evening, I observed Jackie glancing at me and Kathy smiling or laughing while sipping champagne. However, I also noted other behaviors. I witnessed the affection between Jackie and Rick. I kept a careful eye on them from across the table. Jackie listened to whatever her husband said. He was equally committed to her remarks. They had frequent contact. I noticed that when Rick talked, she wrapped her arms around his right hand, intertwining her fingers and resting her head on his shoulders. He placed her left hand on top of his as he did so, unclipping and exposing his ring and index fingers, revealing his wedding band. Perhaps he did this because the stone was so large, but it is more likely that he did so to demonstrate their togetherness. They seemed to be constantly caressing each other, and I envied them. I observed and witnessed what life could be like and should have recognized it. It may have been a ruse or a passing fad, but I believe it was not. I had been observing for a considerable length of time and was therefore able to discern that my partner was aware of my distraction. Kathy excused herself to the ladies' room, accompanied by Jackie and Fran. I rose to assist her in returning to her seat. Instead, she smiled at me, eliciting a profound sense of warmth. She took my hand and led me to the dance floor. After a brief interval, she gazed up at me and inquired, "May I confide in you? I am certain you will not be displeased." I was perplexed by her question and uncertain of how to respond. Her boyfriend was present and she wanted to leave with him. I had previously jested about this, but I was concerned that she was too wonderful to be true. Therefore, Katie moved away from me and looked me in the eyes. She spoke with a serious tone and a harsh expression. She stated, "I am here with the men I choose to be with." She then relaxed again, resting her head on my shoulder. What I was about to say before being interrupted did not become evident. My mother revealed that I was the individual she had intended to introduce to me. I was incredulous at the content of our previous conversation. My superior's secretary has expressed a desire to facilitate a relationship between her daughter and Katie and me, citing her own mother's penchant for locating romantic partners for her daughters. We found this proposition amusing. I am gratified that we met Kathy. In hindsight, I regret not extending an invitation to your mother on that initial occasion. Our interaction was characterized by a mutual sense of sincerity. We engaged in dancing. After a few minutes, I succumbed to her charms. She then inquired as to my whereabouts at the table. I provided an honest and prompt reply. Later, I came to recognize the comfort I felt in her presence, particularly when Jackie and your father were on the dance floor. I sensed a slight tightening of her features. I was unaware of your preference for older women. This discussion is not about your mother. I am aware of what I am lacking. When a woman loves me in the same way that your mother loves your father, or in the same way that he loves your mother, I desire a woman who loves me in the same way. She gazed at me with striking green eyes, even when she was angry. I smiled at her and kissed her forehead gently, as long as it was directed correctly. However, this occurs on occasion. What if she asked me quietly? Even then, what else? I would like to inquire as to whether it would be possible for me to request that you allow me the opportunity to become better acquainted with you and to gain a deeper understanding of your individual personalities. I would also like to express my desire to become a source of support and guidance for you in all aspects of your lives. I am aware that you are a woman, and I am honored by your interest in me. I have always held Kathy in high regard, and I am grateful for the strong affection she has shown towards me. This is the reason why I have never attempted to pursue a physical relationship with her. However, at this moment, I am experiencing a profound desire to connect with her on a deeper level. I gazed down at her and noted that I appreciated the list she had compiled, but I felt that it lacked one crucial element. She appeared bewildered for a brief period. It became evident that I had neglected my wife. We concluded our dance and kissed. By the time the song ended and the dancers began clapping, our kiss had already broken. We looked around to see many people smiling at us. I took her hand, and we sought a quiet location behind a potted plant. "I want to take you home," she said, looking up. I was unable to do that today. I considered this to be an opportune moment. By that time, the music had ceased, and the band was leaving to take a break. We returned to the table. Her mother looked up and smiled softly. "There you are," she said. We anticipated that we might have to send out a search party. Everyone at the table laughed as if they understood why we were gone. Something had changed as we listened to the table conversation. I felt. Katie's touch reflected a great deal of her mother's mannerisms. I was prompted to consider whether this was an instinctive or learned behavior. Jackie concluded the event with a final toast to mothers, suggesting that they occasionally possess an understanding of the subjects they discuss. She fixed her gaze on Kathy as she spoke, and it seemed that everyone around the table concurred, taking their final drinks. Kathy embraced everyone at the table, and I shook hands with each of the men. I proceeded to retrieve my vehicle when the individual in question arrived. I utilized the valet service and requested that the door be held for me. I ignored him. I then proceeded to escort Katie around the vehicle before opening her door. I assisted her in getting into the seat and even buckled her seatbelt. I was eager to depart as soon as possible for a number of reasons. One was that there was a line of individuals behind us waiting for their vehicles. The second reason I desired solitude with her, so I tipped the valet and we departed. We had not even left the vehicle when I felt her hand on my leg. I had a highly enjoyable evening. I am reluctant for this to come to an end. I drove her back to her apartment complex, and she did not utter a word as I stopped at my door and let her inside. Later, we were in a dark bedroom. I will not provide details about our night because it was. The intimacy of the situation precluded further discussion of the planned excursion. When I awoke the following morning, my companion was still at my side. She did not inquire about our destination. As we approached the jewelry store, I observed a distinct expression of delight on her face. I allowed her to select a set of rings, and there were no objections regarding the price. She was surprised when I informed her that she could not wear it, but she promptly placed the box in her pocket. Upon our arrival at her parents' residence, I inquired as to whether we could pay them a visit. A few minutes later, we were greeted by Jackie and Rick at their door. Once inside, I began, "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I have come with a confession and an inquiry from last night." The three of us exchanged glances. I then proceeded to explain my actions, stating that I had taken advantage of the circumstances and that I should have refrained. However, I did not. I should have been polite and respectful and taken Katie home to her residence, but I did not. I am concerned that I have dishonored her. She is very close to me, and I would never want my actions to betray her or our child. That is why I have come to request your permission to ask Katie to marry me. This surprised everyone. I explained that I would only ask for her hand in marriage with your approval. Jackie interjected, "I believe it will be Kathy's decision, but we are both grateful to you for caring for our child. I can now leave my daughter for a time." She then excused herself and summoned Katie to the other room. Within a minute, they had already taken Rick away. I sat in the room, pondering my actions. The wait was not long. Rick returned to me, and Martin, Jackie, and I extended our blessings to you. However, we would like to inquire further. We anticipated that we would fall over. We would like you to leave her with us and come back tomorrow to ask her if you do, please wear a costume. This is an obvious request. There will be a party with these words. I was led to the door. I considered the costume as I drove. The only thing that occurred to me was that we could go to church together. Why the wait? Were they seriously? We would simply be engaged, not that we would necessarily marry immediately. However, I was eager for things to progress rapidly. The day passed slowly and heavily for me. I was concerned that everything was too good to be true, and I experienced difficulty sleeping at night. I felt more isolated than ever. My son appeared, and I called to ensure I would arrive on time. I planned to arrive before 9 o'clock. I had intended to attend the church service, but this was not to be. I did, however, receive an invitation at approximately 1 p.m. As might have been expected, I arrived at the appointed time. Jackie greeted me at the entrance, her smile being both pleasant and somewhat persuasive. I was led into a room where Katie and her father awaited me. When we were all seated, Jackie inquired as to my reason for coming to see Martin. Glancing at Kathy, I became aware of my desire for her. In my life, her absence the night before was still too vivid for me. "Mrs. Taylor, I have come to ask your daughter to marry me." Jackie smiled. "You have been blessed, just as you were yesterday. Do you require some privacy?" As if on cue, the two of them abandoned us. I proceeded to the couch where Kathy was sitting. Her hands were resting in her lap. Her right hand was positioned protectively over her left. I took a seat next to her. She shifted her legs, allowing her knee to make contact with mine. I gazed into Kathy Taylor's green eyes and inquired, "Will you take me as your husband?" A ring box materialized in my palm, which I then opened. I was met with a pleasant surprise, the ring was still there. Upon turning back, I observed that Kathy was holding her left hand with the ring in place. She kissed me and whispered, "Yes, yes, yes, and please don't be upset if you let me look at it." I was compelled to wear the ring, and I am gratified that I did so, as I was lonely the previous night. I was concerned that my mother would dissuade you from accepting my proposal. The phrase was completed with the appearance of tears in her eyes. We proceeded to embrace for a few minutes before Jackie entered the room. We inquired as to whether we could join them when they returned and sat across from us. Jackie smiled at her, and she returned the gesture with a glint in her eyes. She began, "It is evident that the answer was yes, but I was already aware of it." Kathy was the only individual who expressed skepticism about the situation. After stating her opinion, she smiled at Rick. She acknowledged that he was aware of her perception of me as a demanding person. However, he always allowed me to have my way. I am grateful for his understanding. I will do my utmost to ensure your satisfaction. I am confident that you will succeed in making your daughter happy, Martin. From the moment I first laid eyes on you, I sensed that you were a perfect match for each other. Despite my efforts to facilitate a connection between you, I was ultimately unsuccessful. However, the fact that you found each other on your own serves to reinforce my current assessment of the situation. Do you intend to dishonor my daughter? Jackie arched an eyebrow in response. Dishonored, and I extend our apologies to you and your mother, Katie. She blushed as she answered. It is our business. Rick just smiled and shook his head. We are undeterred. Kathy, you agreed that I may express my opinions now. Do you have any concerns? My ears popped and my palms were clammy. What was all this building up to? Yes, ma'am. I didn't use birth control, and it turned out that Kathy didn't either. You are. Kath, you are correct in your assumption that Kathy never took the pill or any other form of birth control. However, it is unlikely that you used birth control as you have claimed. Her father, in response, sank back in his chair, rolling his eyes and shaking his head, yet he continued to grasp Jackie's hand. I did not utilize birth control, as you have stated. You have also said that you love my daughter and do not want her to be dishonored. That is correct, Mrs. Taylor. When I stated that, Katie kissed my cheek and placed as she did so, her head was placed on my shoulder. At the same time, her left arm was extended and her fingers were pointed at the ceiling. It appeared as though she was examining the ring on her finger. Jackie's face displayed an expression that could be described as Martin. It seemed as though she had been looking at the ring since I had left. She then grabbed the ring and stared at her husband. I believe I understand why it represents your love and her dedication to you. I must ask, however, where I was during this time. I would have liked to propose a solution to your. If one wishes to recognize the gifts bestowed upon them by their daughter, a potential solution would be to demonstrate this through marriage. This can be completed as promptly as possible. Mrs. Taylor will complete it as promptly as possible. Is this agreeable? If I could set it up today in this house, I would. I was incredulous upon hearing this news. I turned to look at Katie, who frowned slightly. She pulled me close to her and whispered, "We do not have to." I looked at my soon-to-be mother. Indeed, you are capable of doing so. However, the ultimate decision will be yours. I am not insisting, I am merely suggesting. I smiled, "So that we can sleep together tonight without feeling ashamed." Martin, you are free to sleep together in either case, and we will not be ashamed. Kathy, do you not wish to take a chance tonight? After all, you may change your mind. I only wanted to allow you some time, Martin. I am your lady, with or without the ring. My heart belongs to you. I turned around. If it is not too much effort for you, I would consider it an honor to get married today. Jackie gazed at her husband. She smiled, indicating that she was quite delighted. She placed the call. We waited while we waited. My future mother-in-law. The law revealed that today's wedding was my idea. I addressed it with Rick and then with Kathy. As I have previously stated, I am selfish. I want Katie by my side. She is my only daughter and child left. She left us and spent 5 years in California. She just got back to us. She arrived approximately a month before you, Martin. As I have stated previously, I am selfish. I want Katie to settle down here with me. I want to see her happy. I want her to give me grandchildren. Martin will try his best for you. Catherine is 33 years old. Mom, you don't. Jackie corroborated my assertion that I am your mother, thereby conferring upon me certain privileges. I previously mentioned that she is 33 years old, but with the appropriate partner, that is to say Martin, she will have the opportunity to bear me grandchildren. I should have approximately 10 by now, but that has not occurred. However, you did not manifest in her life until recently. She waited, and I believe she acted prudently. The minister arrived a few minutes later, and Kathy married Martin Raymond Jameson in less than an hour. Just as we were leaving, my father, Jackie, our mutual in-law, prevented us from proceeding further. He stood beside him, both hands resting on his arm. He then gave me a bundle, which I later learned was a week's worth of material. We stayed at the Imperial Hotel downtown for an extended period, occupying a honeymoon suite. This gesture was a token of gratitude for your assistance. Our week-long stay in the suite was nothing short of idyllic. Jackie ordered all of our meals, and the staff called to inquire about our preferred time for service. The first meal consisted of lobster and oysters, accompanied by a greeting card with a note of encouragement. "You must remain resilient," it read. She had signed it, and beneath it, she had drawn 2 eyes, both with long lashes, but one was close-set. She winked at us during the first week I returned. My superior summoned me to his office, where I considered the implications of my actions. Jackie was waiting for me. "Martin, I would like to turn to you and request a favor. I will do my utmost. I would like to ask you first, then Kathy. I am aware of Rick's perspective, but it is ultimately up to you. I waited for my mother. The law proved to be full of surprises. I would like to request your permission to have a large wedding for you and Kathy." I frowned. "Please be gentle with me. She is my only daughter. Rick and I did not get married. We eloped and married. We had no wealth, and my father was not pleased with my choice of husband. We were beginning from scratch. Rick earned everything we have now. He earned a nice living, so you allow me to indulge in the wedding. If you concur that Rick should add another week or 2 in either Imperial or Hawaii, should that be your desire." I was aware of what that would mean for her, and I smiled. "I will allow you and Katie to work out the details." She stepped forward and kissed my cheek. "I will achieve my goal, as I am her mother. I will use guilt. Thanks, Rick. You are a great man, and I am proud of the woman my daughter married." She turned to leave, but then turned back to face me. "Did I tell you that I intend to be a controlling mother?" It had been determined that the wedding would take place on our 6th anniversary. On the 1-month wedding anniversary, as we waited, life settled down and we began to enjoy all of the benefits of married life. We moved into Katie's flat and left our own. We retained what we wanted to keep since we were about to buy a house, which was part of establishing roots. The big day arrived, and we were getting married. I would suggest remarriage. As we stood at the altar, the preacher offered a short address. We would like to acknowledge the presence of our friends and family, who have gathered here today to witness the reaffirmation of vows between Maren and Katie. 6 months ago, I had the privilege of officiating their wedding. They wished to be together without dishonoring their family, and now you are aware of this decision. Let us proceed with the ceremony. The wedding proceeded without incident, and we have scheduled another in Hawaii. I realized that it cost my father. The cost was a fair amount, though not as much as Jackie spent on her wedding. They were thrilled, and we were pleased to oblige. Following the festivities, we returned to our home one evening. I entered the house just as Kathy was answering the phone. Jameson Residence. Hi, how are you? It was not a significant inconvenience. I merely wish to inform you of the situation and express my apologies. I must admit that I somehow neglected to email your invitation, but I included it with the box. Yes, the picture is indeed as you described. I am pleased to hear that. I thought you should be aware of the matter. In fact, you are the first to whom I have conveyed this information. Martin has just entered the room. Do you think I should inform him? There is a great deal to discuss, so I will have to excuse you for now. Connie, I look forward to your next call. It is always a pleasure to speak with you. I was the controller in the audience. I empathize with your sentiments, but I am compelled to depart. Martin has arrived and is gazing at me with affection. Who was that? I inquired, perplexed. It was merely Connie. What is her name? Kathy grinned as she dialed a telephone number. What are Houston's area codes? Within a minute, all calls from Houston were terminated. What was that? Kathy smiled at me. I am coming out again. Have you lost? Your mind is evidently well directed, but what was that just then? The buzzer sounded. I have tasks to complete, but I will endeavor to elucidate as you have requested. As she approached the laundry room, she retrieved an envelope. It was smaller than a letter, and it appeared to be a greeting card. In the laundry room, she removed the clothes from the dryer and placed them on the counter. I attempted to capture her attention, so I held her in my arms and set her on the dryer, facing me. Now, I implore you, tell me what transpired. I experienced a sense of remorse since we had not informed Connie about our wedding. Consequently, I sent her a modest package via FedEx. I did not anticipate her receipt of it on the same day, but that is no longer a concern. Continue, if you please. The package included a newspaper clipping about our wedding. Indeed, the ceremony was quite memorable, wasn't it? I alluded to this in a roundabout manner. I also sent the remaining invitation with her name on the envelope, indicating that it had been misplaced. Furthermore, I included a photograph of myself and the intended bride at the altar. It is my sincere hope that no voodoo queens remain in Houston, as I would be forced to pay them to transform me into a toad. I am not convinced that this will occur. In addition, I included a single napkin of each color with our names on it. Finally, I added a card, as previously stated, which I had planned for her to receive tomorrow. The intended bride then removed the card she had brought with her to me. I opened it and discovered that it was an announcement about an impending birth. As I read, I discovered that Jackie purchased the cards on the Saturday before our wedding. I should have informed you of this earlier, however, she contacted me before you arrived at our residence. I was not concerned about this delay, as I was eager to reunite with my wife. We made love on the dryer when we finished and took a brief interlude to recuperate. I had an epiphany. Connie will see the dates of our ceremony and arrival and assume we were going to marry. This is irrelevant to us, as we are aware of the truth. The discrepancy will not affect the outcome. However, it is evident that the veracity is not a priority for her. She is distressed, and it is imperative that I provide her with support. I simply have to remind her of what she has lost later that night. A notion occurred to me: should I send a thank you card to Ann Baxter? Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you found them enjoyable, please like and subscribe if you have not already done so. Additionally, please provide your thoughts on the events that transpired in the comments section below. Best regards.